Hey everyone, and welcome to Almost Cancelled. I am Peter, and today I'm going to be talking about Chucky Season 1, Episode 5. It's called Little Little Lies. So, full spoilers for the episode, as always. So, we had some big developments in this episode, and we had the biggest connection to the movies yet, which is the first thing I have to talk about. I have to talk about Nika Pierce, her character possessed by Chucky, along with Tiffany being introduced into the show, and the insane 80s flashbacks of what else can I call them but Chucky Wiseau. Like, this was insane. Obviously I got that it was the 80s. I got that this was Charles Lee Ray meeting Tiffany. Obviously they did the swerve in the episode where you think the woman that he's sort of interacting with first is going to be Tiffany, but then it turns out that the second woman is Tiffany, and it's just a bit of a swerve. Which is fine, which is totally fine. This was interesting the way it was shot, but there's a couple of things we have to talk about in these scenes that are all like how they were achieved, like the technical choices and the ways that they pulled this off. Number one, young Charles Lee Ray, especially with the sunglasses, looked like Tommy Wiseau, which isn't like a million miles apart from what we've seen in the past of what young Charles Lee Ray as an adult looked like, but it stuck out, right? I was hearing Tommy Wiseau voice in my head like every time it cut to him. Secondly, and this is something I genuinely did not notice whilst I was watching the episode. I actually watched this late Tuesday, but it was too late. I was like too tired afterwards to record a review, so I rewatched it today and putting the show out now. But since I watched it the first time, I read that Brad Dourif's daughter, Fiona Dourif, played young Charles Lee Ray. Now, one of the things that was so like amazing about the ending of Cult of Chucky when Nika became possessed by Chucky was the performance from her and how good she is at emulating her dad's Chucky voice. Now, obviously, it sounds different because it's coming from her, so the idea is it's this woman's vocal cords that are making the sounds, but the inflection, the way she laughs, the way she matches the wording and how he talks, like she's got it perfectly. So the fact that she was able to with I'm sure a bit of help of makeup and hair and whatnot, but the way she's able to just, I never even realized that this was her playing this version of him. Never once. Now, obviously, the other big thing to talk about is the dubbing here, where they use, present day Brad Dourif dubs the voice so that it's Chucky's voice that's coming out of the mouth, and that is a little distracting. It's really kind of clunky. It doesn't look right at all, because even though it is Chucky's voice, it still feels kind of oddly fitting to it. It's because Chucky's voice by its nature has always been a little cartoony, because it was always a voice. We might have heard Charles Lee Ray talk at the start of Child's Play 1. I can't remember before he dies. We probably did hear him say something, but even by its nature, it got a bit more animated when he was doing the voiceover work for the doll itself for later in the movie. And it's just always been that way. Whereas here, the choice was to make it sound a lot more like the doll. So he young Charles Lee Ray sounds like the Chucky doll. And that was a bit weird. And what's funny is that when they presented this first woman in the nightclub, I thought, wait, if this is Tiffany, why haven't they dubbed her with Jennifer Tilly's voice? Because Jennifer Tilly's voice is pretty distinct. It would be quite noticeable. So obviously there's the swerve that happens where it's the second woman turns out to be Tiffany, but they still cheat us because she has that actress's voice until she kills or to help stab the first woman, and that's when the voiceover changes to Jennifer Tilly. So it's obviously a little bit silly. Like they know this is a bit goofy, and they know it doesn't look real. Like, it feels a bit fake every time these dub voices come in, but you kind of roll with that a little bit because it's just kind of part of the fun. Like Chucky's always been a little cartoony, certainly since Bride of Chucky onwards anyway. So it never felt like it was betraying the tone or just the feel of the show by having this, particularly for just these flashbacks where we have this kind of bad dubbing of the modern Chucky and Tiffany voices over these younger actors, just to sort of make it clear. And I suppose the thematic reason, if you want to try and justify it, is that she doesn't really become Tiffany until she stabs someone, presumably for the first time. I don't remember the lore enough to know if she was murdering people before she met Charles Lee Ray, but it is mentioned in Bride of Chucky that they were a couple when he, quote unquote, died. So this is them meeting for the first time in the 80s. So neat. Set of flashbacks. It kind of sets up what they were like together, so that when we see present day Tiffany with Chucky possessed Nika, I should say, we have like a sort of through line there. Honestly, my biggest critique of the episode is a structural one. Honestly, I had that really. I just hit the mic. Sorry. I had this really weird issue with how it cut to these two characters. I thought it was so. The big flashback where the murder itself happens, where it turns out that the other girl's Tiffany, and they do the stabbing, and it's like they're like turned on by each other, and it transitions back to present day. I do not understand for the life of me why it doesn't transition from that directly to the scene with Tiffany and Chucky Nika in present day. Instead, it transitions to the scene with Bree at the therapist office, and it's the scene where we find out she has cancer, and it's like a really drab, typical TV scene of her go, "I've been lying about having cancer. That's the secret she had," right? And it's obviously we need to do this scene at some point, but it's it's relatively pretty dull as far as scenes go, in terms of the tone and the style that we expect of this show, and what I think most people enjoy about a show like Chucky. So it's a weird thing to cut to after that scene to start with. But the reason why it's particularly odd is that it's at the end of this scene that it just casually cuts to the hotel room where we see Tiffany and Nika like on a bed, and they've got a guy like tied to a chair, and there's a dead body lying on the floor. I'm like, this is a big deal. This is the first time we're seeing properly other characters from the movie, right? Obviously there's been Easter eggs and there's been teases and things, but this is the first time we're outright just having a scene where we're getting to hear them talk, we're getting to catch up with them, and it just cuts to it like it's nothing. And at least if it transitioned from the flashback to this, it would have felt like a bigger deal. It would have felt like, oh, we're transitioning to them in present day, and that'd be kind of neat. Instead, it just cuts to it after this random scene of Bree at the therapist office. I thought it was like a structurally weird choice. It made the entrance felt really just like, oh, we're doing this now. Okay, this is kind of, I don't want to say anticlimactic. That feels a bit unfair, but it certainly felt a little bit just sudden and without build up. And I think that's a legit complaint. It's a legit complaint from just a craft standpoint. I felt this a little bit jarring, and I did actually wonder as well as I was watching, because obviously I enjoyed the movies and I get the lore that this is building upon. And for like a minute at the start of the scene, and I was enjoying seeing Fiona Dourif's performance again, pretending to be Chucky. All that stuff was good. But it was sort of in my brain, I was like, do you know, the way they've cut to this, like, okay, they've established this relationship in the flashbacks, but they've not necessarily established enough of what's going on here for anyone who's never seen the movies, who's just watching the TV show. This must feel like so random and like unexplained. And for better and for worse, it's actually not too long into the scene where there is an exposition dump that explains what's happened to Nika in the movies. The context for this exposition dump is that Nika actually comes back for a minute. She, Chucky's been all threatening. He sees some blood on the blade, and it kind of snaps her out of it. And of course, Nika was in a wheelchair, and Chucky possessing her fixed her body. So when she turns back into Nika, she actually drops to the floor, and then she's all weirded out. She asks the date. She said it's been 2 weeks since the events of the last movie, which. And she's probably right, although I would like to point out that they never mention a year, so they could actually pull a bigger swerve with this, where it's actually like she hears November, whatever date it is, and thinks, oh, it's been 2 weeks, but it could be 3 years and 2 weeks for all she knows. She didn't ask the year. she might have been she might have been possessed by Chucky for years at this point. which could match the real life time period, or alternatively, yeah, the last movie might have been taking place at the start of the season, and we are that close to it, which is fine too. But like, there is room for that to be a longer gap than I think she thinks it is. I do like that Nika's still in there because she was a likable character, and I like that this is something that there's someone to fight for in that body and like sort of get control back. Obviously, I expect Chucky might pretend to be Nika at some point to trick someone. That could be a fun beat. But like I say, her performance doing the Chucky voice is so good. Even the way she physically carries herself. Like, this is a scene that starts with her and Jennifer Tilly having like a sort of like raunchy scene where they're both in their underwear, and they're kind of like mocking the guy for being scared instead of aroused. But even the way she's like, in her underwear, but the way she sort of like holds herself or stands, and the way she kind of like has her hands in the back of her hips and is kind of like almost putting her belly out like a pot belly. Even though she's clearly a very in shape woman, the actress, the way she's holding herself just feels physically different, like it is a guy, and it's really well done. So her performance as Chucky is one of the things I was excited about getting more of when this show was announced. So I am delighted to get more of it, and I am excited so far from the little we've seen, and I'm looking forward to it intersecting more with the main story of the show when it gets there. So could be really cool stuff. And the scene is otherwise is solid. It is worth mentioning that Chucky is aware that Nika came back for a minute and kind of kills the guy before he can mention it to Tiffany. He doesn't want that getting out there. Why is he losing control of Nika? There's a couple of reasons, perhaps. One could be that he is spreading himself too thin over too many like dolls or whatever, and as a result, he does lose control occasionally. One could just be that, unlike a doll, a person already has a soul, already has someone in there, so maybe they could play with the idea that, well, he can take over a doll and he'll just have the doll forever because it's a doll. It never had anything that he's replacing, really. But a person like has someone in there that might fight back, and maybe that's like what they'll play with. But that's neat. I did like though how this, like, when she explains and we see clips of the last movie of him doing the ritual to like take over more bodies or more dolls. It did kind of foreshadow and neatly set up the fact that he can do this ritual to jump into a new body, which was relevant for the ending of the episode. So that I feel like it was a good setup for that. There is a lot to take in here, and when she does like go over what happened in the last movie, and we get like a montage of all these things happening, it does feel like a bit of a dump for people who don't know any of this. And I did feel it. Like you kind of need it. Like, you need to explain this to people who didn't see the movie. But I did feel the dump of information just happening at once. It wasn't the neatest way of doing it, but yeah, like I said, that's a very understandable thing. I do not understand why it just cut to this after the therapist scene, though. It felt really unceremonious the way it just cut to it, when just putting it before the therapy scene would have made it felt like it flowed in from the flashback, so it would have felt like at least a nice transition into them in present day. Alternatively, you should have had more of a build-up where maybe we don't realize that it's them at first, and there's like a dead body or something, and you kind of like slowly reveal who it is. It just cuts to them, and there's, it was weird. So that's my biggest problem with the episode, I think. Obviously, there's all this stuff with the main story to talk about with the kids and all that, and love the opening of the Chucky doll being thrown into the waste, where the hospital throws all of its used needles in little biohazard bags. I did question this being so easily accessible to a visitor. I'm not sure that, because it doesn't look like this is supposed to be used for anything other than medical waste and syringes and things like that. There was nothing else in this dumpster other than biohazard bags except from Chucky. But whatever. Chucky's like living his best life. He's swimming in the needles. He thinks it's great. It's amazing. And don't worry, I did tweet a photo of this to Connor to scare the shit out of him because he hates needles, and he's the first thing I thought of when I saw Chucky delightfully enjoying all the needles sticking out of him. But Again, we have the kids working together. They know they have to deal with Chucky. Lexi finds out that he was thrown in the trash, so she seems to know exactly which one to go to right away, but that's a minor quibble, whatever. They run into the dumpster and there's like a debate. They all kind of, I like that they have like a moment where she's like, no, we have to do this together, and they're all kind of like, but immediately she still gets to be her character where Devin agrees, yeah, together, and she's like, I just said that, and like, no, he's agreeing with you. He's like reinforcing it and sort of having a bonding moment, but she doesn't read it that way. She reads it as, I just said that. Stop trying to take my thunder. But they can't find him, obviously, and we do get a new doll. Caroline gets a new doll from her dad, Tommy in this case, and she freaks out. This is actually a really funny scene where she freaks out at the doll and just starts beating up in front of her parents, and they don't know what's going on. And she takes a photo to send to the others. But it's a really amusing scene, and I think one of the things that I was noticing in this episode is that they're kind of trying to really give you more of a reason why Lexi is the way she is, and sort of make her more sympathetic by showing that her mother is a bit unfair towards her. Her mother is actually starting to come off as more of a villain than she is. We see that like throughout the whole episode as her being mayor and trying to justify tax money to fix her house, and the way she just ignores the crowd at the end when they're booing her. And Lexi calls her out on it. She calls her out and says, you're going to be lying to people, and she's very dismissive of her daughter the whole time. And you start to understand a bit better why she maybe is the way she is. And her dad's kind of trying to stick up for her a little bit. So it's making the dad more likable. It's making the mum less likable. And it's making Lexi a bit more understanding and sympathetic. And the fact that she is working more with the other characters is obviously just a natural way for us to like her a bit more. And she is better with them. And I did like the other theme of this episode, which is that Junior is noticing that she's hanging out with Devin and Jake and is being weirded out by it. And there's a nice couple of levels to it as well, which I like, is that there's him getting mad at the dinner table, and the dinner table scene in and of itself feels like a little melting pot of like a lot of things to come character wise, where Logan's getting frustrated about Junior and about the running. Jake and Junior's kind of blowing up at each other because Junior's trying to take his phone from him because he's mad that Lexi's texting him but not himself. It's like there's a lot of stuff that's sort of like kind of like bubbling, and like the tension's kind of starting to overflow in that scene. But I really liked the scene in the school, which is them in biology, and the teacher has to leave the room because Devin's mum's doing police work or something, and Lexi goes over and they're basically trying to discuss, okay, we have to find Chucky, we need to find him, like who's he going to kill, and they're sort of working they're trying to think it through, and they're like, okay, so who would he be going for, what would his plan be, blah 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 blah. And Junior's just watching the whole time, and he comes over eventually, and I think what I liked about this scene so much is how genuinely sad it felt, and not in like a pathetic way. You didn't think he was pathetic, but he doesn't get mad in this scene. He gets mad later because like Lexi's still not telling him anything, and he's mad again at the dinner table because of the texting. But in this scene, instead of getting mad, he just tries to be a part of the group. He actually tries to do it in a healthy way, where he brings up Westworld. He's like, has anyone watched Westworld? And he tries to talk about a TV show. And obviously it's like frivolous compared to what they're talking about, because they're trying to stop a murderer. They've got really serious shit to talk about. But he tries to just like, and it's just so sad and awkward the way that all of them just kind of go, sorry, no, I've been busy. And then it ends with Lexi even saying, no, I've not had time this week. And it feels like they're kind of all pushing him away. And they kind of are, but it's because they know he won't believe if they just tell him, the doll's alive and it's killing people. That felt like a really genuine attempt, but like this might be the most likable and the most I felt for Junior in the entire show, and maybe because I'm an introverted weirdo or something. But the idea of him trying to bond with people over a TV show, for them all just to think it's not lame. That's not how they react. They just like, this is not what's on their minds. This is not what they've got time for. This is not a casual chat they're having. They're doing serious business. They're doing serial killing huntering stuff. Entertaining, and not entertaining. Entertaining is not the right word. It's awkward. So very awkward. This was a This was almost like a Michael Scott on The Office kind of like moment of, but in a good way. So I thought that was well done. That's good stuff. So very nice. So Chucky himself. So I was very pleased with the twist at the end of the episode. If you can even call it that, it's just more of a, I'll call it a reveal rather than a twist. And I say that because, you know, I was already speculating that that Chucky was already in the other doll and we just had two Chuckies now. Lexi does say that she checked and it's just a regular dumb doll. And while, like, I'm sure Jake's explained to check for the batteries and whatever, like, there's no reason why he couldn't fake that and put batteries in to cover his tracks. So I wasn't convinced necessarily. Obviously, at the end of the episode, it turns out, no, Tommy was just a regular doll with nothing in him. But the big swerve is that we get the the classic sad moment of Chucky with the melted face looking into the window as it's raining at little Caroline with the new doll. And that's a really funny moment because it reminds me of the Wii U looking through the window meme. I got a chuckle. But it's revealed at the end that he transferred his soul to the new doll, right? So he's in a fresh doll who looks normal and that Caroline trusts. What I dug about this is that earlier, before we knew this, when the other kids came over, when Jake and Devin came over, because the burned Chucky doll has been thrown in the bin, in the trash, and Lexi's waiting there and she's holding the lid down and like they've got a sack and they're going to try and kill Chucky. And at first there's it was a cat or a raccoon or something. It was like an animal that jumped out quickly. It was clearly which was causing the movement that was happening. But they pull out Chucky in the sack and they smash him to bits. And they take the sack off and he's just in little pieces. And they kick the head away and they go, "Yay, we killed Chucky!" And I went, now obviously, I knew, obviously we're halfway through the season, I knew for a fact that we're going to have another Chucky doll, we're going to have Nika, we're going to have all these other things. Like, the story has so many things that it can still do and be and whatever. But even if that's the case though, I still thought it was a bit weird that one of the Chucky dolls, assuming that it was still Chucky possessed, was this easily killable by just stomping on it, because like we've seen him go through hell in these other movies. Like this just felt like it felt weird that this was such an easy defeat. But then it made sense at the end. It made sense at the end because he was not a possessed Chucky doll. He was back to just being plastic. This was just a doll. So that all cleared up for me very, very nicely. And there's no complaints to be had. If anything, this was just a hint. It was a hint that he'd already transferred souls, and that's cool. So very neat. And the big payoff to this, of course, is that there's like a town meeting at the junior high school or the middle school, whatever you want to call it. Which is interesting having the meeting at this school, because presumably this town also has a high school. So why the junior high school over the high school? I don't other than the fact that this is the one that our main characters go to is the reason. That's the real reason. We have the set for it, but why not the high school? Or another place that would be suitable for such a meeting, like a town hall or something. I don't know. Whatever you pick. Maybe this school just has the best auditorium. I don't know. But yeah, Lexi's mum gets booed, called a liar. She's basically, she thinks herself as this great mayor, and the town are all kind of starting to turn on her for being this. And she has a great line earlier in the episode when she's complaining about Lexi's voice. She says her voice is like cheap silverware on a mass-produced plate, which is the most snobby, uptight thing I might have ever heard anyone say. Look, she can't just say her voice is a fork on a plate. She has to like describe cheap forks and cheap plates. The sort of silverware and cutlery and stuff that she would not use. She would never dare touch that. She's and even later on when she's arguing with her husband and she's got like weird beauty strips on her cheeks and stuff, and everything in this episode makes her look like a stuck-up, pompous, like self-entitled cow, basically. So yeah, the big ending. Lexi tries to tell Junior because he gets mad at her, but he doesn't believe her. And then when they tried to bring out the principal, her decapitated head comes rolling onto the stage. The reactions are glorious. We cut to, like, fresh Chucky pulling the ropes for the curtain, laughing his ass off, and we see, like, what's revealed is the rest of the body with the flipping the bird at the audience in a chair. And then it sort of cuts back and shows you him, like, swapping his soul to the new Chucky doll. So, good, great ending. The ending was really funny, and it feels like it is escalating to the point where, okay, the kids think they've solved this for a little bit. The adults don't know it's solved. They still think there's a murderer on the loose. But just when you think that the main characters think it's settling down, Chucky does this big public display where he's not revealing himself to be the killer. They don't know a doll's doing this still. I'm sure they're going to go look for whoever's pulling the curtain at the start of the next episode, and they're not going to find anything. Or even if they find the doll lying there, there's not much they can say. Maybe he'll hide, maybe he'll go somewhere else. But this is not a necessary reveal of him yet, but it does feel like a big public display. Like, Chucky's enjoying scaring the shit out of this town. He's enjoying causing the chaos. He's laughing at the manic world that he's creating and the hysteria that he's producing. He's having a blast. And in turn, when Chucky's having a blast, I feel like we're having a blast. So, now the reactions to the severed head and everything, and the kids freaking out because this isn't possible, we killed them. All of it's good stuff. It feels like this is not as easy as you thought it was, and that's what makes this entertaining. There's more to it than this. It felt too easy because it was too easy. So here we are. We still have this to go. And I'm glad, because the kids working together is definitely a really fun element to the show, which I think needs to continue and needs to grow and be more of a big deal. The mom having cancer, I don't really care. I don't really care that much. I'm sure it'll be a plot beat for a reason, or whatever. Obviously, the continued theme of, like, parenting and parents with their kids. Obviously, we get a lot of Lexi's mother this episode, and her father as well, to be fair. And obviously, Logan's like, you're still going to go and do nationals, Junior, kind of thing. But I suppose the other big thing to talk about this episode, which I know people will be very upset if I don't mention, that Jake and Junior finally had their kiss, the big kiss moment. And I didn't think they were going to kiss this episode because they already held hands. I thought the holding hands was going to be your thing for now. There's a whole scene in the school where Devin takes Jake's hand and it does that speed up effect around them where they're standing there, and it's like, the time's standing still for them as the world moves on. Get a little bit cheesy, but all fun. And I did like, though, that when they do have their moment, it's after they've killed Chucky, they're feeling at their strongest because they think they've won, and the sun's coming up and they're on their bikes. First of all, them being on their bikes is a nice touch, because, when I think of kids working together to stop something bad, I do think of movies from the 80s where it's all kids running, around on their bikes, and the Goonies-esque vibe of it, or a modern audience may think of It, but It takes that from a lot of other things. And Stranger Things obviously is the other big one. So I dug that as a thing, but this is not subtle by any means. But I did enjoy that in the background during their whole kiss scene, there is a cross. There is a giant cross structure. But one of the perhaps a slightly subtle touch to it is that it's not the front of the cross. It was actually the back of the cross, because you could see all the structure and the scaffolding and kind of the wires, if you will, holding up this religious monument. I like that touch. I like that it was happening behind the cross. It felt like it was a nice little cue. You could argue you have to sneak this behind the Christian world, if you will, or you could you could probably read this a couple of different ways. If you've got an interpretation of this happening behind a giant cross, I'm all for hearing about it in the comments. But I thought it was a nice visual, if nothing else. And yeah, so good episode. I had that one, the way we cut to the characters from the movie for the first time felt really weird to me. But other than that, really good episode, and I'm really excited to see more of Fiona Dourif as Chucky Nika. I'm excited to see her be Nika again as well, but she's so good at being Chucky. It's unreal how good she is at emulating her father's mannerisms and the way he speaks. while still sounding like it's coming from her. It's not like the flashbacks where it's dubbed and it's his voice. It's still her doing the voice, but it feels like what Chucky would sound like coming out of a woman's mouth. It's great. It's so good. So I am full on board for that. So thank you very much for joining me. Let me know what you thought of this episode in the comments below. Like and subscribe, all that stuff. Get us on the Twitters at mailed_fuzz for channel updates. You can get me on Twitter at Wibble89, and obviously hitting all the buttons on YouTube does help us out a lot. You can also support us financially over at patreon.com/mailedfuzztv for as little as $1 per month and help keep all the content coming. But otherwise, that is me. So thank you once again. And it is worth mentioning as well, I've not said this every episode, and I probably should. Myself and Tim do a horror movie podcast, and we did review all 7 Chucky movies back in 2017. I'll remember to put one of the cards that pop out in the corner. I'll try and remember to put a link into that playlist. But that's over on the Mail Fuzz Movies channel. I just re-uploaded them all over there over the past couple of weeks, so they're all there now. Cult of Chucky just went up today, so yes, you can go hear our reviews. We sound a little bit different, we might look a little bit different because it's just a few years old now, but you can go and get our thoughts in depth on all the movies. But that's me. So thank you once again for watching or listening. I always appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?